Well, it's weird. I never thought I would end up having my own, like, crypto hominid story, as tenuous as it is. But it's not the first time I've told it, but to actually, like, I've told my family and stuff. My kids look at me and go, what? Hey, I'm just telling you what I saw. It is what it is. You can decide yourself. Right? But I saw this thing that's consistent with what I've heard about. And as far as stories go, it's maybe not that exciting, but it's another data point. This is what's hilarious about this, is when I was a kid, those videos or those films of the Sasquatch that was walking along the river on the west coast came out. And it was new then. It was crazy. Like, there were, like, the $6 Million Man had episodes with the Sasquatch in it, and aliens, but the Sasquatch figured very prominently. And there was all this stuff in the media about it, and as kids, we ate it up. We thought it was crazy cool. And then they had the Loch Ness Monster, and then the abominable snowman in the Himalayas, and this, when you're a kid, it's awesome. And then you grow up and you forget about those things, and it just sort of was an interesting thing to run into, and we didn't have the internet back then. We got it all from the same place, the cheap Berlitz books about the paperbacks, and then the TV series stuff, and like, so it could be wishful thinking, could be wanting to see something that's there that wasn't, but I know what I saw. I paced it out, I looked at it, I tried to be objective, because in my heart, I'm an experimentalist, and the evidence there has to be something. You have to not project, and if you do, you have to remember, I'm projecting now.
The main thing is to treat people with respect. There's a lot of people that have these sightings or interactions with quote unquote Sasquatch, and you want to assure them or reassure them that they're not crazy, and make them feel comfortable. Try and get as much information as possible. What they saw, what they were doing, what time of day it was, the location. There's a lot of different factors into going into an investigation. I mean, I've been a paranormal investigator for years. So if you believe in spirits and afterlife and entities, then you're probably open-minded enough to think that, there's such a thing as a cryptid, such as Sasquatch or Dogman or Chupacabra, things like that. There's so many, right? Mothman, and then you get into the whole UFO alien phenomena, and so many rabbit holes to go down. But there wasn't one specific moment for me, but I have had moments since then.
I was one of those kids who would always, when we went to the library, check out any books on UFOs or the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or anything like that, anything that seemed weird. And I have a memory from when I was like really little, like sit on your mom's lap kind of little, and we were riding the monorail at the Toronto Zoo, and it went through like this forested area, and I saw a Bigfoot like standing in the forest waving at me, and I was like, what the heck? And I remembered that my whole life. I'm 47 now, but when I was 40, I was like, maybe I should Google that, like Toronto Zoo, Bigfoot. And it turned out that in like the early 80s, there was someone who like dressed as a Bigfoot and did that for fun for about a month at the Toronto Zoo. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't see a real Bigfoot at the Toronto Zoo, but because of that experience at the Toronto Zoo, whenever we'd go on long car drives, I would have my face like glued to the window looking into the forest, being like, any Bigfoots in there? Any Bigfoots in there?
I was just gonna say, it's a stupid story. It's barely a Sasquatch story, but I think it is a Sasquatch story, and I can't prove that it's a Sasquatch story. But from what I've heard and everything, a lot of it has to do with the veracity of the people telling it and whether you can believe them or not. So I encountered a structure that I believe was built by like Sasquatch, like whatever that thing is. I never planned to do this, like to go and I'm gonna find something like this. So my wife has always been wanting to go to Letchworth State Park, and the Grand Canyon of the East it's called. And we got this 1974 Trillium trailer, like retro trailer, and we had started thinking, where do we want to go with it? And so New York State is actually quite close driving wise. It's easier to get to like the Allegheny Mountains in a shorter time than it takes to drive like to Thunder Bay or Sudbury or like northern Ontario. So we've done a fair amount of like traveling in the US, and we really like it. And she always wanted to go. I'd never heard of it before, and well, sure, well, let's go. So we planned a vacation in July of 2023, and so we looked at the hiking map, and near where we were camped, which was at the northern part of this park, there was a trail, and it went, I think it was 3 kilometers in a loop, and it went up to the border of the park, and then there was a trail going down to the canyon floor, and we were planning on going and doing that, hiking the trail and then going down to where the river is. So that's kind of how we ended up where we were. It was nice, lots of chartrelles and different kinds of mushrooms. And we got to the end of the trail where the loop split and part of it went down to the river and the other part went around to go back. And I just sat, and then I was just looking around and I saw this tripod of tree trunks just off the trail near where the trail coming up from the river met the main trail. And I thought, well, that's really odd, because the trees were really big. They must have been 4-inch diameter trunks. The height of it must have been 10 feet or so. And it was deliberate. It wasn't, they didn't fall that way, because the way the angle was, they met in the fork of a tree, and there were some other branches kind of around it, but there were no stumps that caused this, like the trees that would have fallen that way. So it was a deliberate looking thing, and so I was looking at it for a while and go, what is this doing here? Right? Now, this is where I started pondering where I was and what it might be. And I've seen some of the videos about structures that, these Sasquatch and these creatures have been purported to make. Okay? And I thought, could this be one of those things? And so I started looking really carefully at it. And again, there was no garbage anywhere. It was off the main trail, maybe like 10, 15 feet away. There was a lot of deadfall, like deciduous leaves everywhere. So it wasn't cleared out like someone had camped there. There was no fire ring there. So, and I've seen places where people have fires beside rivers. When you're hiking hiking along a riverbank, you can see, someone had a fire here. The evidence is really clear and it stays for a long time. And then there's usually a cigarette butts or beer cans, or not in a gross amount, but some evidence of people. And there was none here. And then, I went up into the area where it was. And then I was thinking also, last year everything was shut down for COVID, and this park was shut down for a whole year. Nobody was here. And that would have meant that the whole area would have had no people in it, which makes it pretty wild place. Here's the part. It's all circumstantial. I looked at how this thing was built. I didn't see any drag marks from anyone recently doing it. The leaf clutter was really deep. There wasn't, it didn't look like it had been recently disturbed in any way. It wasn't close to the campsites. You had to kind of work hard to get there. And it was at the perfect spot between where the cliff goes around, where the trail goes around, and it's just cliff after that, and trail coming up from the river. So if this would be the place you would come up to, maybe. So I said to her, I think this is one of those tripods that the Sasquatch make. And she said, oh, who know? How can you know? And I said, well, you're right. How can I know? I just think it didn't leave. I just, I was still looking at mushrooms and thinking about what I saw. But I built lots of forts as a kid. And kids couldn't have built it because it was high up. The trunks were like this, 3 to 4 inch plus diameter, and they were stuffed into the Y of a tree, fairly high up. So we get back to the car. We've been walking. I didn't see any other structures or any kind of tripods or anything else except at that site. And then we got to the trailhead, got back in the truck and drove back to where we had camped, and decided to stop at the nature center because it was on the way. And I got out there, and we went to the camp store and got stuff, and then wandered in to look at the exhibits in the recreation area / nature center. And there was a ranger on duty, and he wasn't like a summer student or anything. It was his full-time job. So I go over to the desk where he is, and I said, Ranger, I think you have a Sasquatch problem. And he goes, oh, really? Yeah, really? And I said, well, let me tell you what I saw. And I told him the story I told you, a little abbreviated because I wasn't reflecting. It was very after. And he said, I told him about the tripod, and I said, I know it's going to sound crazy, but I saw this tripod structure at the end of the trail, and I told him what trail number we were on, and I can show you on a map where. And I explained, I didn't see litter, I didn't see a fire ring, I didn't see evidence of somebody building a fort. It was a weird place to do it because it's. And he said, well, maybe it was kids building a fort. And then I looked at him and said, oh, might have been us when we were kids building something like this. But what kids do that now? And we both laughed because he realized how ridiculous the idea was. And I told him how big the branches were, or the trunks, and where it was. And said, I know that's all I got. But it's consistent with stories that other people have said. And then at first he said, well, we have a real Sasquatch problem, right? In a joking way. And then after we were talking for 5 minutes about what I had observed and the lack of physical evidence of people around, because the trees were not cut, they were raw. The ends were really rough. And I said, well, there was no one here last year, was there? He said, no, it was all closed. I said, well, this feels like it was something that was done within the last year. I don't know. You can go look because it's out there. You can go check it out yourself. It's not a. He said, I'm gonna do that. And he changed it a little bit, and he told me his story about his uncle and how they would hunt in the park in the fall, turkeys and stuff. And there was an old legend about tree knocking sounds. If you hear that, that was the native spirits in the forest trying to find their way home, and that was the knocking. And his uncle and his father had gone out hunting early in the morning, and they were out hunting turkeys, and I can't remember if it was if they had knocked on a tree or something, but they heard a really loud knock, and it was enough for the both of them to decide to not hunt in the forest that day, that they left. And again, this is circumstantial, and this is secondhand, but after I told him what I had seen, he told me this story, and I said, well, I believe your story. We both know it's circumstantial. And he said, yeah, that's circumstantial evidence, true. But it fit.
I'm trying to think of the first time that I had any real interaction. Myself and some other members of Ontario Sasquatch were up in the French River area, which is northern Ontario, close up near Sudbury. And we went to an area where one of our members has had several sightings of a Sasquatch. They've had incidents where rocks have been thrown at them. And we're not talking like baseball-sized rocks. We're talking like bigger than a bowling ball. And like these things are being hurled over 60 yards. And there's no human being on Earth that could do that. Like not even the strongest shot putter on the planet could do that. And when I went up to the same area, I broke away from the group. There's 4 of us, and there's a hydro cut, power lines going through this area, and it's really remote. So it takes almost half an hour to 40 minutes to get to this place off the main road, and it's down a dirt road. There's a few cottages at the beginning, but as you go on and on, there's nothing. Like there's no other people. Like it's remote. So when I broke away from the group, I found this huge boulder, and I laid down on it. Beautiful day. It was sunny and warm, and I laid down on this boulder, and I was just kind of meditating in a way. And from behind me, I heard a growl, and I shot up, and I was like, okay, is that a bear? Or, your mind's thinking Sasquatch. Before that happened, maybe about 5 minutes before that, about 300 yards to my left towards the north, I heard foot stomps, like something big going boom, boom, boom. And I'm looking at this area, and then I heard them again, and they didn't continue. They stopped, and that's when I laid down and heard the growl. And when I went back to the group, I said, did you guys hear those foot stomps and that growl? And they were like, no. They were a good 50, 60 yards away from me. But they said that they heard rock clacking, like something clacking 2 rocks together. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And when we were leaving, there's a small creek, and there's a wooden footbridge. I guess it's for the hydro crews to get across. And as we were walking by, something in the bush, maybe about 100 yards away, started knocking. You've probably heard about wood knocking with Sasquatch. And it gave us 3 knocks, and I had a little, it's almost like a little wooden billy club. So I knocked on the side of the bridge 3 times, and it knocked back. It stopped, and I knocked 2 or 3 times, and it mimicked what I did. And me and whatever this thing was making the other knocks on the other side went back and forth for a few minutes. And I thought that was really cool, because you always hear about these wood knocking conversations between Bigfoot and people. And we said thank you when it was done, and thank you for your time. And we left some gifts behind. We left watermelon, some French fries from the local chip truck, and And yeah, I thought that was really cool. I mean, I didn't see anything physically, but that was neat. And and people could say, well, it's another person, but you're almost 40 minutes in the bush. There's no other vehicles when you arrive there. You're, you know, 20, 30 kilometers away from the nearest road. So one thing a lot of people believe is a sign of Sasquatch is tree structures. And you'll find like trees that are bent in unnatural shapes. You'll find like teepee structures. You'll find branches or trees that are crossed. And you think, well, how is this possible? The wind can't do that. The weather can't do that. What's climbing up a tree and taking a 6 or 8 inch diameter tree or a length of wood and weaving it through branches 40 feet up in the air? Like, people don't do that. Bears don't do that. And so the wood structures are a sign for sure. The wood knocking, of course, but that's usually something I've heard where you would have to instigate it. You'd have to start that conversation. Other things might be people report a terrible odor associated with Bigfoot sightings or encounters, whether they see them or not. So people say it smells like rotting meat, or if you ever smelled a dead body, that sort of thing. I haven't experienced that yet, but those are some things you might want to keep an eye out for.
I saw this movie come up called Discovering Bigfoot by Todd Standing, and I watched it and I was like, oh my God. And he was showing how out in, northern Alberta in Nordag off of a logging road, he found these like structures that Bigfoot had supposedly built. They were like kind of like teepees, but they were made out of big trees and logs. And he's like, yeah, that's a sign that they're here. We don't know why they build these things. I saw that movie and I thought, I wonder if anybody in the Bigfoot community online has reviewed this movie, what they think about it. And I hadn't ever gone into that community online for whatever reason. I don't know why. But I searched around and I found a guy named Utah Sasquatch who had posted a review. And he said, yep, they totally do that. They make those structures. But you don't need to go to northern Alberta. Sasquatch are everywhere. And so then I messaged him and I was like, what do you mean everywhere? And he's like, dude, there's millions of them, not like 1,000. And he found them within city limits in Utah where he lives. So he's like, here's what you do. Go to Google Maps, find a place that has water, like a fresh water supply, lots of cover, and prey animals, and go there and go off the trail. And I was like, well, there's a place like that 5 minutes from my house. And I lived right over there. And so at lunchtime, I just got in my car and drove down here. And over there is the trail that we walked on to get here. And I just came down the trail a bit and took a left turn straight into the thick woods. Not even 5 minutes later, I found one of those teepees.
Okay, so I'm 6'1", just to give you an idea of scale.
And I was hooked so bad. I was like, okay, well, this could be a coincidence. Like maybe somebody put these sticks here, or it was weather or whatever. But I kept searching there, and there were lots of things in there, probably 10 or 15 of them.
Like I said before, there's no weather protection here, like outside, inside, right? What is it for? I don't know. Does it make me interested? Yes, I'm interested in this.
And I basically tried to find the people who seemed to know something about the topic and asked them everything I could about it. What about this? What about that? How can I see one? Like, how can I increase the odds? What are the best practices? All this kind of stuff. And here and there, I would get suggestions about what to do. And there was usually an emphasis of respecting Bigfoot. In many native traditions, Bigfoot represents honesty. So that's like, don't try to pull one over on them because they'll know. Also, don't try and joke yourself because you know in your heart what you're doing. So whenever you're going into a situation where you're trying to find Sasquatch or Sabe or Bigfoot or whatever you want to call it, go with respect. And one time I didn't, and That's why we're right here in this location. So I spoke with this guy online and I said, I really want to have an encounter. And he said, well, you need to find a place where there's a clearing in the forest. Hopefully there's water around, still look for the good spot, but then find one where there's also a clearing. And he said, go there when it's a new moon. That means there's no moon in the sky. It's the opposite of a full moon. It's no moon. Ideally, there's also cloud cover, because then it's dark. And I said, why? Why would I want that? That sounds scary. And he said, well, you want to be in that clearing, making yourself very vulnerable and giving the Sasquatch maximum advantage. You have no night vision, they have great night vision. You have no cover, they have lots of cover. So they're interested in humans, and he thinks that's one of the reasons why they make those structures, or I think that. And so they want to come in and check you out, but they won't if they think they're going to be seen or caught. But if you make it very easy for them to see you and very difficult for you to see them, they'll probably come in. He said, just hang out in that clearing. Don't have any weapons or anything, because some people think they can tell what your intentions are one way or another. A lot of people think they know what guns are, maybe because they've been shot at in lots of places. I don't know. But so I came out here and I walked down this path, which is only maybe 500 meters long. We're within city limits, by the way. Like, this is in London city limits. You can probably hear cars in the background. I said, okay, I can do that at night. I can go there at night. It's close to my house. I feel safe. It's a clearing. There are houses nearby. I waited until a new moon in May 2021. And I came out here at 2:30 in the morning. It was 0 degrees Celsius. So cold. And it was pitch black. Like, you could not see a thing. And I just walked from one end of the path to the other end of the path. And then I came back to where we are right now, which is roughly halfway, let's say. And I just stood. And I was standing roughly right there. And after about 15 minutes, I started to hear some really heavy footsteps over there. Like, thump, thump, thump. And I was like, okay, could be a person. Could be a person. And then I heard some really loud branches breaking. Like being snapped. Something really loud being snapped. And I was like, oh boy. But it started freaking out a little bit because it started walking over that direction, which is where my car is. And I was like, oh no. Because it got to about that position over there. And I was like, is this thing going towards between me and my car? Whatever it is, even if it's like just a person trying to freak me out. I don't want to have to go through them to get to my car. And so given how loud it sounded and that there was nobody was saying anything, I just kind of got out of here and I was freaked out. But I was so intrigued. And when I got home, I was like, darn it, why didn't I stick around to see if it was a Bigfoot? Why didn't I shine my light? Why didn't I do this or that? I waited till the next new moon to come out here. And I said, okay, I'm going to go with a heat vision camera, right? And that way, even if he's over there in the heavy cover, if he's there, or she, whatever, the Sasquatch, or the person who's just in the woods at 2:30 in the morning with 0 degrees Celsius, freezing their butts off, breaking branches, I should be able to see something. So I came down here and I didn't hear anything over there, but I heard something over on that side of the pond. And I could see something moving around with this thermal camera. And it looked like it was kind of reaching, but it was all down in the weeds and I couldn't make out like a clear outline of anything really. It didn't look like a deer. It didn't look like a dog. It was just kind of something moving around. And something whizzed past my head and went like sploosh in the pond. And I was like, oh God. Like, I don't know what that was, but it came pretty close. And so I think it came from over there. So I turned around and was looking over there. I couldn't see anything with the thermals. And another thing went by this side of my head, like probably within this far because I could hear it whiz by. And it splashed in the pond behind me. And then 3 more times that happened. And I was like, oh crap. Like, I didn't think about this before, but like trying to be sneaky with a thermal camera is not respecting Bigfoot, if that's what it is. And I was like, oh, this is not good. Like, I've brought some high technology out here, and now there's big rocks or something. It sounded like a rock the size of a softball hitting the pond behind me, which if those hit me, like, I'd be in severe trouble. And at 2:30 in the morning, like, my wife wouldn't notice that I hadn't come home or whatever. After those rocks came, I hightailed it out of here, and I thought about it for a while, and then I came back out at the next new moon, and I just stood here saying sorry for a while. Sorry for bringing that thing down here. I shouldn't have done it. You know, it wasn't very respectful, whatever. And one rock whizzed past my head and went in the pond, and then nothing else. No sounds, nothing. I was here for probably a half hour after that. That was it. One rock whizzed past my head. I didn't hear anything else, and I just took that to mean, like, thanks for the apology, but, like, also we're not going to interact with you right now. Just go home.
And then later, and I guess doing a little more research around it, I thought of I had a theory about what these tripods might actually be, because everybody has their theory about what they are. And if they're as smart and as adapted and clever as people describe them in their stories, why would they build a tripod with no deadfall? It's not like a deadfall brush fort that you would build if you were a kid, or it's all open, but it's something you could climb up and sit at the top of. And you think, why would you do that? Why would anybody do that? And when you hunt, the use of tree stands isn't so much to, well, it gives you a good view of the area around you. If you were a large omnivore, that to keep your bulk, to keep the amount of mass that these things purportedly have, you have to eat meat. It's not berries and roots and stuff. You have to eat meat. So I was thinking about this tripod. It's the right height that you could sit on the top of, and deer and game could walk under you or near you, and they wouldn't see you. This area was a trail that went down to the water. It would be easy for deer and other animals to use that trail when nobody was around. And if they sat on the top of this 10 to 12 foot high structure, they could leap from that very easily down onto game. And so I'm curious now about whether that's true or not. Because it felt like a hunting stand.
If you talk to Native Americans or Native Canadians, they've been around in their culture for hundreds of years. They've had, and that's one of the things that makes me believe even more, because if they were making cave drawings and totems of Sasquatch, then, like, where do they come up with this idea for this huge hairy hominid? And they have nothing to gain from it. It's not like they're gonna, back then there's no fame and fortune, and it's part of their culture. And even I think it was Leif Erikson, the Viking, report, from his logs, when he arrived on what we now know as Newfoundland, he was greeted by large, hairy, black-eyed beasts. So same thing applies. There's no reason for him to make something up like that and report back. It's like humans, right? We're all similar, but there's some of us that look different, right? Whether you're from Asia or Africa or Europe or Eastern Europe, we all have similarities, but we all have differences too. Like in the Himalayas, they call them Yetis. Americans call them Bigfoot. Canadians tend to refer to them as Sasquatch. You have in Texas, they call them wood buggers. the skunk ape in Florida. And then there's another one, that a little known term called Janowska, which apparently they're large black Sasquatch, and they have a bald head. And we don't get many reports of them, but we have had them. And then there's also the phenomena of the dogman, and I think people think that they're seeing a Sasquatch because they can't wrap their head around that this 7-foot tall canine walking on 2 legs could be anything but. But I think there's different. We hear different colors. Like there's the red-haired ones, brown, black, and we've even heard reports of albino. One thing that other people report, and I have seen once, is orbs, light anomalies. When you're out researching Sasquatch, a lot of times people report that these strange lights about a baseball or golf ball size floating through the air, through the woods. We don't know how to explain that. Other people have also said that they have seen a woman in a cloak often, or a woman all dressed in white at the same time as these sightings. I know 2 gentlemen, a father and son, up in the North Bay area, where they go into a location constantly, and they have interactions with what they say is Sasquatch all the time. And one time they were coming out of the trail that they go in and out of, and this was around, I think it was in the spring, because the snow was melting, and when it melts, it crystallizes and gets hard and crunchy. And I don't know what time of the day it was, but it was pitch black out, and they saw a woman in a cloak come out of the trail, and the son got out of her way, and then she came right up to the father, and I won't say their names because I haven't asked for their permission, but he said, Dan, I swear on my life, he said her eyes were glowing blue like lightsabers, and he says, I heard a voice in my head say, kill yourself. And then she just kind of disappeared, and they looked on the trail, and she didn't leave any footprints in the snow. And what's that all about? Like, that's a crazy encounter. But these ladies, or these women in the cloaks, are for some reason in the same area that you find Sasquatch.
I read so many people's personal accounts of Sasquatch encounters through running the Facebook group with my friends, and thousands of posts. And I've listened to every episode of many different Sasquatch podcasts now. My Bigfoot Sightings, Sasquatch Chronicles, the Confessionals has some episodes, Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, like so many of them. But half the people tend to say Sasquatch are some kind of undiscovered ape, right? Some variation on a caveman maybe, but like they're a flesh and blood creature who's very solid in here, and we just can't find them because they're the hide and seek champions of the world, right? The other half of the people say, no, Bigfoot is paranormal. Like, there's no way they should be able to imitate sounds as well as they do. Like, they can mimic owls, they can mimic humans, they can do all sorts of stuff. But people have actually seen them disappear right in front of them, or appear out of nowhere. Or they've seen a Bigfoot that's 4 feet wide hide behind a tree that's 8 inches wide. And that doesn't make any sense, right? But these camps are roughly equal in size. And so at some point my thinking was, if both camps are roughly equal in size, then I'm inclined to believe that both are true. Which is to say that I believe when they're here, they're flesh and blood, but they don't have to stay here. Like maybe they can pop here from another dimension or something, or just from being invisible to being here. And then when they want to, they can disappear again. Some people say that they can use trees as portals. I don't know if that's true or not. There's a lot I don't know. I don't know anything for sure. I haven't seen one eye to eye, I haven't seen one disappear or anything else. But I have heard a lot of testimonials where people have seen these things happen. Or they'll find, like, in the middle of a snowy field, right? There will be 2 footprints and no other footprints. Or snow's a bad example because it can blow over footprints, but let's say a muddy field. There's 2 footprints or even just 1 footprint in the middle of a field. They can walk around that in concentric circles, expanding out, and they'll never find another footprint for 500 feet. Well, how did those prints get there? There aren't prints leading to it or leading away from it. So some people think they're just doing things to expand humanity's mind, essentially. Like, to make us really think about, if this is a flesh and blood Bigfoot, why is there just 1 footprint here? Like, it should have a trail. Or if you see something appear and disappear, it's like, how did that happen? It can't be flesh and blood. Well, we don't really know, but another interesting thing I'll say is that the research of David Paulides from Missing 411, he's got a playlist called Bigfoot 101, which is like the history of Sasquatch. And an interesting thing he's done is go back through all the newspaper clippings from present day until back as far as newspapers go. And the further you go back, the more human-like the descriptions are. They'll tend to call them a wild man, in the 1800s or 1700s. And they describe it as a man who's very hairy, like has the facial features of a man, has a body just like a man's but bigger. Like sometimes it'll even have a bare face but like a beard and long hair and just hair over the body. And then more modern accounts tend to make them sound more apish. But I know a guy who sent me a photo of one in his yard, and it looks like a caveman. Like, hey, there's no question that was human in my mind. So I think of them primarily as a kind of people who are intelligent. They're masters of nature, if nothing else. Like, we might be good at technology, but they're good at nature, and nature's everywhere.
It dropped out of like mainstream thinking for a long time because we didn't have the internet until 98, 97. For real, it existed before, but not in a easily consumed way. And I think because there were some people that had different experiences that were more imminent. And I've heard stories, and I can't tell if the people telling them are ghost acting, like doing ghost fiction and pretending because they want to act out this amazing story that they've written or not. But it just seemed like some of the audio podcasts and people that have been looking at this seriously for years before I regained my passing interest in it seemed to have a real passion for trying to get information about this creature that has no evidence. And what's funny is it's been around for a long time, hundreds of years. The stories. Teddy Roosevelt wrote about it on his trip out west.
When I was a kid, I would talk to my friends about paranormal things, and they all thought I was crazy. And so I didn't really bring them up too much, because once I found out that someone wasn't into it, it didn't take me long to realize I wasn't going to convince them of anything, right? And so my approach has always been just be open and honest. And I don't need to convince anyone of anything. If they would like to hear about my experiences, I am more than happy to tell them. I get excited to tell them, I get even more excited if I hear about someone who has similar experiences. And I just try not to worry too much about what other people think. And I'm also very trusting by default. Like, I've made a conscious choice in my life to trust everyone until they prove that they shouldn't be trusted, So you don't have to earn my trust. I give it to you right away. But then if you break it, okay, now I got to set some boundaries. And yeah, I just don't need to convince anyone. If they think there's something to it, I'll tell them what I have experienced. And who knows if I had some sort of mental manipulation going on to make me perceive what I perceived. But to me, it was real. To me, that's how it happened. And I'll share it if you want to know.
Why it's interesting now, to get back to your main question, is I think that there's so much that is known, or we think we know. And I think the idea of something mysterious that's out in the dark, that obeys its own rules, that is outside of the controlled, is exciting.
I don't know, Sasquatch, for me, and a lot of people, maybe it's that romanticizing where you think it's like a guardian of the forest, or, you know, it's something that's out there looking out for whatever. You know, I know in Native Canadian lore, especially with the Ojibwe, they refer to him as Sabe, which means big brother or brother. And I think it's part of their, I want to say it's 7 teachings, where they have an animal that represents strength, wisdom, knowledge, and they have Sasquatch on there. And he represents truth, I believe. So it seems like a weird, you know, an odd animal that's not real, right? To be put in there, and he's like their icon for truth. So what do they know, or what did they know way back when that we don't know now?
When you have like a little experience like this, like you see that
Yeah.
structure, do you have any desire to, like, I'm gonna go out in the woods and try and look for more kind of stuff like this?
No. I want to say, I should say yes.
No, you don't.
But like I said, I suppose if the opportunity came up, I would go, but I wouldn't. I would stack it onto something else. Like when I go up north to do the rocket stuff with Launch Canada, if the opportunity came to go out for 2 days on a hunting trip with people up there, I'd go, because I'd like to see what's out there. I don't have a burning desire or need to go prove that they exist, that Sasquatch exist or not. I've got other fish to fry and doing other stuff. But it was interesting. It was like oh wow, this is cool. What could this be? And then so this my hypothesis of these tripods being hunting stands for game, that would be interesting to pursue if the opportunity came up. But I'm doing so many other things too. It's not like a PTSD trauma thing I have to work out. It was a thing that I encountered, and that's interesting.
I mean, I've never seen one physically. I mean, I can say that I've had interactions with them. I'd love to see one, maybe not up close, because you never know. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to see one, and if I don't, that's life. I'll continue looking and doing my other paranormal stuff. So, but you know, I've seen spirits. You know, my wife and I have seen a UFO before. I've seen all sorts of crazy things, but Sasquatch, he's on top of the list now. But if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, then oh well.
The world's amazing. We live in the best times. Like, every generation has its troubles. My son reminded me. He said, "Yeah, every generation has their apocalypse, you know." I said, "You're right. Right, from 1000 AD forward, they've all been waiting for the end. There's always been something that's going to destroy the world. Well, we have that too, but if you get over that, we live in an amazing time. The access to information, trustworthy or not, is like nothing that has ever occurred in humanity, in our time that I can think of. in human history, the things we can do, the tools we can use, it's marvelous. So I get pretty excited about that. So we'll see. I don't know if something happens. If I'm out in the woods again and I see something else that's similar, that will be a second point of data, and I will do different things. I'll take samples if I can. I'll take some measurements. I'll be better at taking photographs, because the ones I took of the area, I don't know how useful they are. Right? But I didn't think at the time, how would I do that? So I've done some reading about how I would take better evidence pictures. So we'll see.